America's Stonehenge. How did ancient cultures construct this site in observance of celestial movement and astrological events intertwined within the design? Was this a place of ceremony or habitation? If America's Stonehenge is only 4,000 years old, then why have we found evidence of civilization dating from the time before Columbus? Join us as we embark on a fascinating voyage. Across the planet's largest oceans, people journeyed to far-off lands, anchoring a new life and conquering terrain, constructing some of the most impressive architecture. But when was it built, and by who? We will explore the possibilities and provide a context for this incredible ancient archaeological site. DarkHour Paranormal and Jared Murphy present America's Stonehenge. I am joined with Dennis Stone, the curator and owner of America's Stonehenge. Dennis, before we get started here, could you tell us a little bit about yourself, how you might have been involved in the acquiring of this property, and the family history that you have, again, with this location?
Yeah, it starts with my dad, Robert E. Stone, back in 1955. He was listening to a radio show on a local Boston station, one of the biggest stations in New England, and it was a show on a Friday night called Yankee Yarns, and Alton Hall Blackington was the talk show host. And my dad only lived about 8 miles from where we're standing today, in a town called Derry, New Hampshire. He had never heard of this place. He had been in the Coast Guard recently up in Newfoundland, and then he had a new job at AT&T Bell Labs as an engineer. So he was always interested in the past. So when he heard the radio show, it just really amazed him that this kind of place existed in New England and only 8 miles from where he lived. And again, he never heard about it. The following week, he was at a barber shop up in Derry, the same town, having his hair cut. Waiting to have his hair, he picked up a magazine called New Hampshire Profiles. Several different features about New Hampshire places were in this magazine. And as he flipped through it, he saw pictures of the site, and he saw the title of it and everything. He goes, "Oh my God, that's the same place that I heard on the radio show." So it was kind of a neat coincidence. He asked the barbershop owner if he could keep the magazine, and the gentleman's name was Warren Haywood. He goes, "Well, how old is that?" And my dad goes, "Well, 1952, it's 3 years old." So luckily it had sat in the barbershop for 3 years, so they could have tossed it. And if they had, we might not be speaking today, because that's the thing that really clinched it for my dad, to not only hear it on the radio, but see it in the New Hampshire Profile magazine. And that weekend, they were at my aunt and uncle's house playing cards with about 10 people in the same town of Derry, New Hampshire. And during the course of playing cards and drinking beer and having a good time, he took the magazine out and passed it around to everybody at the table. And nobody really recognized, the site and the photographs and the description of it until my aunt and uncle saw it. And they go, "Wow, hey, that's a place that we used to go to in the 1930s. They used to ride their bikes down here. They picnic." And the next question out of my dad's mouth is, "Can you find the place?" So the next day on a Sunday, the four of them got in the car and they drove all around this area of North Salem, New Hampshire, looking for this place. It was not open to the people or to the public, and they found this old road. It looked kind of familiar to my aunt and uncle, so they took a chance, parked the car, and then they walked about a third of a mile through the woods, and they came up here, and here's the place, and it just excited everybody. My dad climbed under the fence, and he spent quite a bit of time in here. The other three stayed outside the chain link fence. It was all locked up at the time. And when he came out finally, it seemed like quite a while. My mom and the rest of them said, "What do you think?" And he said, "This place is fantastic. It's amazing. I've never seen anything quite like this." And the next thing he mentioned was something about opening it up to the public and maybe trying to purchase the place, which to my mom said something about your rocks in your head, So that's how my family got involved with it. In 1955, we opened it to the public in 1958 as Mr. Bill Caves. And I was a baby at the time. I was 1 year old when we first came up here and saw the place. So it's been part of my experience since I was a baby. My dad died in 2009, and then we basically had already been running the place for quite a few years. My wife was a manager here since 1993, basically. And so it's been a family affair for about 65 years almost, and my son's a third generation.
America's Stonehenge draws curiosity from archaeologists, history enthusiasts, and the common family alike. With over 110 acres and only 1.5 acres excavated, there is still much more to learn within the soil and stone structures.
2,500 feet goes back and front, and you can see the little hump right here in front of it where the sign is. You see
and then the tail comes down here.
Early Americans may have created walls that appear serpentine in nature, but there are differences in the architecture. Colonists used field or glacial stones, building upon the dry stacking method. Earlier civilizations used flat slabs as well as cobble and created points in the construct that rose and fell, reminiscent of a serpent.
With the multitude of researchers and archaeologists that have visited this site throughout the years, what is the most popular consensus in regards to the origin of this location?
Yeah, that's still up in the air. I mean, we think, number one, it's an ancient site. We think it's a ceremonial site. And the question is, who built the site? Native Americans were in New Hampshire going back over 10,000 years, so they were definitely in this area. But there are some pieces of evidence that suggest maybe old world visitations to the New World before not only Columbus, but going back before the Viking period.
Many cultures have been suspected of occupying America's Stonehenge, but there is still much in the way of mystery surrounding its origin. Evidence has surfaced of Native American, Irish monk, Nordic, and Phoenician presence. Whichever culture was responsible for the birth of this site, they were certainly versed in astronomy and stonemasonry. Many inscriptions have been found within the stone maze, including Ogham, Phoenician, and Iberian Punic script.
So the question is, who built the site? I think that's still up in the air. There's evidence against suggesting old world visitations with the inscriptions, place names of New England, and the size, the shape, the orientation of these structures are very reminiscent of what you can find in megalithic sites in Western Europe, which I visited quite a few of them over there in different countries. And we are looking at the standard unit of measure that was used here to construct this. When you build anything in the world, you probably have some sort of measuring stick. In this case, the site does not conform to imperial measurements of inches, feet, or yards, but we think it does conform to what we call the megalithic yard, which is an old world. It's 83 centimeters, it's 32.64 inches. I was first on this back in 1977 when I built my diorama, and back in 1937, a gentleman named Roscoe Whitney was here with William Goodwin, the first researcher, and he said whoever built the site either didn't know about or give a damn about linear measurements, because I've measured the site, the width, the height, and the depth of these structures, and they don't conform to imperial measurements, again, of inches, feet, or yards.
There are many similarities between America's Stonehenge and other known ancient locations, especially around the northeastern United States, where over 800 archaeological sites stand in reflection of the most precise astronomy. But there are a myriad of distinctive properties that reflect the architecture and design of cultures from thousands of miles away.
The moon will rise over that. From the wind platform to that will be the moonrise. It's also a cross-quarter day of February 1st, Imbolc or Candlemas, or Groundhog Days in the same time period.
If we did indeed come to the conclusion that a society well before Columbus has built this site, and perhaps the 600 others that are scattered throughout the northeastern U.S., what sort of impact might this have on academia in the world of archaeology at large?
Well, first, I don't think there's any ancient stone ruins in the Northeast. That's what we've been told. You know, the archaeologists either look at colonial. If it's pre-colonial, they're looking at points and they're looking at pottery. They're not looking at stone walls, standing stones, chambers, serpentine walls, astronomical alignments with monoliths, that kind of thing. And there are about, we think now, about 800 sites from Quebec all the way down to Pennsylvania. So this would definitely change our past. As the late David Stewart Smith said, he died in 2016, and again, he spent almost 40 years on this site. He said, I think there's an ancient culture or a lithic culture of stone builders in the Northeast. And he said it's kind of undetected by many in the mainstream, unrecognized and ignored and sometimes ridiculed. And because of mainstream, some of these sites have now have been destroyed because of lack of interest and by them saying, well, they're nothing. And so people come in and do construction and the structure goes away. So that's not very good either. But I think it'll change our ancient past before Columbus. You know, there is an ancient group of people building stone ruins, and these things are as fascinating as they are as in Western Europe, or all the different ancient sites in South America, Central America, Mexico. These things are amazing, but they're all over the landscape. And I think it's more than just the Northeast, because we're finding similar type of stonework all across North America, right out to California, Washington State, and Oregon State too.
Jared and I were incredibly grateful for Dennis Stone's energy and attention and wisdom regarding America's Stonehenge. I had in my heart a feeling that I would soon return not necessarily with this project, but of my own accord.
Now, how much stock, speaking of paranormal, do you put into paranormal activity purportedly on this site? And as the owner and caretaker, do you think that whatever might be here may show some benevolence to you in the position that you've taken?
No, I feel peace and harmony up here. I always have. Maybe when I was a child, we'd hear stories about maybe there were burials. Like some of the structures here look very similar to some of the burial tombs in Europe. The East-West Chamber reminds me of the galley graves. They're found in Holland, they're found in Northwest Ireland, and I've seen them in France, and they're called galley graves or gallery graves. The wedge tombs of Ireland, I've seen a few of those when I visited with my dad, and they look like Uppbeat. So as a kid, thinking maybe people were buried up here, you know, that always gives you a little bit of goosebumps. And then we have the table. And then there's all the rumors and stories and legends of what the table could be. You know, is it an embalming table? Was it a slaughter table? Was it a ceremonial table? Or was it the sacrificial table? So as a little child, I think maybe I had some, you know, a little bit of fear of the place. But by the time I was a teenager, we actually used to come up here and spend the night. In 1972, we actually watched the Planet of the Apes on top of the sacrificial table with a black and white TV. So, and when we spent the night inside the Oracle Chamber, so by then my fears had probably left me, and we were all teenagers having a great time up here. So, but I walk my dogs up here all the time, and all I do feel is peace, and I feel harmony. Other people may sense something different, but I would say most of the people coming up here say, you know, they don't feel that fear, they don't feel that, you know, kind of a negative energy. What they feel is something positive, you know. It could depend on the person, maybe. But most of them, I would say most of our visitors and researchers come up here and say, no, I feel pleasantness up here. I feel at peace, you know. And that's what I really feel up here. I think because we're protecting it, we're protecting the entire 110 acres. Hopefully the people in the past that may have used this place, you know, appreciate the fact that there aren't homes built all over this hilltop. And it's because of people like William Goodwin, Malcolm Pearson, and my dad. You know, my dad ended up buying not just the 20 acres that Malcolm Pearson and William Goodwin had originally purchased, but he bought the entire hilltop to protect it from homes. Can you imagine looking out at the winter solstice and seeing actually a really nice looking home there, but a home, not the stone.
I imagine Dennis and his family would be held in a particular light to whatever energy is present, dedicating their lives to the protection and analysis of such a site. But there is always the possibility that the spirits called in throughout millenniums still hold the ground sacred and are adverse to any inquiry. My camera froze, I was picking up audio that was not present in my environment, and my electronics in general were going haywire. Nothing was as crazy as what I felt in the way of energy inside the Oracle Chamber, which I happened to accidentally step into.
Oh my god. I don't like it in here. I don't like it in here. What is that? I don't like it in there. I don't like it. I'm not going in there. I don't like it in there. Oh no.
Here's an example of some of the aforementioned audio interference. As I walked into the chamber, immediately I felt like I walked into a wall of something incredibly heavy wherein it was pushing on my chest and pushing me out of the chamber. This was the first and last experience I had of this caliber.
The problem with this site, like any others, is when you label things moon temple, sun temple, sacrificial altar, fertility goddess. That's the problem with all of this, is that then you get an image in your mind, and it's very difficult to filter that image out.
Mm-hmm.
So we are looking at something that a site where we've gotten carbon dating and different OSL dating and LiDAR and all sorts of work has been done at this site to know that it's been occupied and had occupation over 8,000 years. The reality is that this may not be a table.
I did not necessarily come to this site to investigate the paranormal, as I believe that some of these more ancient energies are best left alone. If this is a sacrificial table, this would be indicative, again, of a very long-lost civilization.
This could be it could be anything. It literally could be a half feature of a wall that was actually upright. This is part of a picto design of some kind. But unfortunately, sacrificial altar it conjures up a way more interesting concept. To say that this is to say that this is something that you either lay a human being or an animal down, and in reality this was tilted up, and we're just looking at what was a scratched out something that it's gone. But we don't know that.
Myself, I have to say that overwhelmingly I feel a sense of peace here, other than that one incident that I had in the Oracle Chamber. And that was only that one evening. Now, I've been in there with you, and I've been in there with Jared as well, during the day and at night. And although I still feel a heaviness or some sort of different environment within that chamber beyond, the claustrophobic, that it actually is, what's claustrophobic about it. By and large, this place is a really calm and smooth energy flowing throughout the property, and yeah, I sit with you on that in respect to the paranormal activity here.
All paranormal activity aside, I did have a very unique and interesting experience while walking the grounds with Jared Murphy and Dennis Stone.
Dennis, you've not seen this before on the wall?
I have never seen this before on the wall. I can, on my deathbed or whatever this is. It could be my deathbed. You guys are killing me.
Welcome to the final sacrifice of America's Stonehenge. We're headed to, happily to his sacrifice.
But yeah, that I have never seen before. Nope.
That is a natural...
You know what it is? I've been focusing on this. And your eyes focus on that, you miss the thing next to it.
It's the detail, when it comes down to it. I mean, whether you have 20/20 vision or not. As I looked over here, it was just something that caught my eye, the same way that perhaps something like this did. But again, it was the detail that was very interesting. I had to take a look.
That is awesome. That is totally, I got to get a great... This
is cool, Dennis.
Yeah, I know, and you guys found it.
Man, this is awesome,
Well,
bro.
I should record the time.
Yes.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I mean, this is... Scott?
Can you casual discover things? Yes.
Yeah. And you know what? I wouldn't want to be anywhere else in the world right now than right where I am.
Oh my God. Did you see it first?
Yeah, I did. I discovered
You discovered something.
I don't know what it is.
What is the date today?
It is the...
Today is the last of the month. Yep.
It is the last of April. Okay, so that's when I have never seen that. Never, ever. And obviously,
so cool.
It's not fresh, no, whatever it is.
No, it's quartz. It seems to be, it's like they found it, it was convenient, and they, hey, we don't have to mark this stone, it marked itself.
We need Scott Walters here for the geological analysis.
Yeah, look at...
And we need your, all the thoughts that you have.
Look at what we just found here.
I never noticed that before. I'm going to get a picture of that too.
Very quickly, I'm going to show you what we've been talking about here at length. I happen to be looking over at this particular stone that Dennis was talking about with a notch on it here. And this one actually lines up with two other stones on the site. And I happen to look down, and this, whatever this is, it's some sort of laying in or inlay of the stone or highlighting of that stone. But it does look like a Phoenician letter.
Indeed, what I had discovered did appear to have some resemblance to a Phoenician letter, but more time and analysis is needed to be conclusive.
With the multitude of different cultures that have undoubtedly traversed this site, do you think that modern archaeology assumes a singularity in respect to the origin to be folly, or something more intellectually presumptuous?
Do you want to phrase that a different way for me?
Sure.
Just
absolutely.
So
in respect to the different cultures that have been here throughout the years, archaeology today assumes that, at least in a general sense, they assume that most of these sites were built by a single culture.
Yeah.
Wherein, again, we know that many of these cultures may have existed on the site and added to it. Do you believe that that's something to have real concrete grounding in respect to a theory, or do you think that this particular thought that, again, one culture created a site to be more presumptuous?
Boy, that's a $1 million question. Number one, we think there was a layering of cultures at the site, and it may have been used over a very, very long time period. The late Louis Winkler from Penn State, he actually published, like I mentioned, his 5 years of research here, and he puts this into like 3 phases of construction and different people building it. But there's about 800 sites in the northeast, and the question of these sites related to, is it the same culture? Are there similar structures just coincidentally? And now that we're finding these same kind of features in Colorado, Alabama, and on the West Coast, that brings up even a greater question again. First off, we have to find out if they're contemporary or built at different time periods, and if they're built in a similar time period, could these people have been in communications across the landscape? And that we haven't got to yet. We're still kind of, I'm still taken aback that we have these things going across North America. We haven't got to that point of actually figuring out the time periods and if there could be some cultural connection between this site and other sites. Mainstream thinks that anything that's built before the colonial here is a hoax, fake, or fraud. They don't want to admit that these things could be older than the colonial period of time. So this has to be built by the Paddy family, the shoemakers. And at one time they used to say, well, if there's an ancient culture of stone builders, where's the other sites? Mm-hmm. Well, in Goodwin's time, they knew of 15. Today, we know of about 800 sites. So that question, I don't know, that's kind of a moot point now. There are many, many sites, And maybe this is like Dave Stewart Smith. There was an ancient culture of stone builders or a lithic culture across the Northeast, And I don't know if I answered your question, but I think when we look at what Dr. Winkler did, too, 20 years ago, he actually, on his different maps, he puts different eras, like stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, in different groups in different time periods of construction up here. That was from the best knowledge he had. It kind of like Stonehenge. It was like stage 1, 2, 3, ABC, over 1,500 years of building Stonehenge. It kind of almost paralleled that, And he does that with the star alignments. What he uses for time period is the way the Earth's tilt changes very slowly over 41,000 years a cycle, the obliquity, and then the precession of the equinoxes. So he uses astronomy and also our 12 carbon datings to back up his theory. It wasn't just like, this is my opinion. He tried to use some data and facts and stuff like that. And that puts out his best theory, I guess, or hypotheses.
What is the possibility of the majority of sites in New England being built by the same culture? And in the same breath, does that imply these cultures were nomadic? Or did they set up residence and perhaps traverse these sites in some sort of cyclical fashion in observation of celestial events? Perhaps their very lifestyle reflected the behavior of the cosmos and not simply the structures they created. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, interesting, yeah. So if these people are hunter-gatherers, how would they have time to build a site like this? If they're just, roaming all over the countryside looking for food. So maybe they were more, I think the word is sedimentary, where they would have been in one area maybe for a longer period of time. There are some really close parallels to other sites. The size, the shape, the style, particularly the serpentine walls too. And when you look at some of the 400 in Connecticut, they look so much like what we have here. So I don't know. We're going to have to do some more dating on these sites, number one. And there is optically stimulated luminescence going on in 12 different places in New England. Of the 800 sites, they're doing 12 right now. It'll be really interesting to see what type of results we have. If the dates are all over the map, obviously, it's not the same group of people at the same time building these things.
Regardless of who is actually responsible for the construction of America's Stonehenge, what does remain is a sense of activity, sprawling structures comprised of stones weighing many tons, and the megalithic and monolithic elements are well established.
But I think the top of the site was not a living area. I think this is reserved for observations, some of the 57 alignments with the sun, moon, and stars. If people were married, people died, and maybe some of these served as tombs also, The other sites in New England, too, are astronomically aligned, too, with the solstices, equinoxes, cross-quarter days. The Upton Chamber in Massachusetts seems to be aligned with the Pleiades, which is kind of cool. There's stellar alignments, too, at some of these sites. So, yeah, we don't have all the answers yet. I think the OSL is going to help us date them. Once we date them, we can see if they're contemporary or if they're built in different time periods.
What you're seeing is an example of LiDAR scanning, which allows archaeologists to excavate without invasion.
Now, you've been here at America's Stonehenge for essentially the duration of your life. and you could have at any point decided to go a different direction in respect to career and what your interests are. Is there something beyond the archaeological implications, the intellectual curiosity that this particular site holds for you personally?
Well, that's a great question. You know, I don't know if I can articulate a good answer for that, but it's been in my blood ever since I've been a baby. I've been around the whole thing. I really never have taken it for granted. I've always had a fascination with this. You know, and then when we get into the astronomy, you know, and then the epigraphy of the site, or the inscriptions, you know, and then the similarity of these sites to old world sites, like the megalithic sites in Europe, and seeing so many comparisons, so many similarities that seem to rule out just coincidence, you know. But it's just a vast, who are the people that built this, you know? And I mean, I think about that all the time, you know. Up in we live literally on the other side here, and I think in my backyard, we may have one of the oldest, you know, stone-built constructions in North America possible, you know, if the data is correct, you know. And then somebody built this. You know, where did the people come from? Why did they build this? What happened to these people? And was it different groups of people at different times that built this? Some of the questions you've already brought up, you know. And then I visited other types of ancient sites out west in the southwest. We love that kind of thing, you know. I've been to Mexico several times, and then throughout Europe and to Africa and stuff. But to see some of these other different ancient sites and then kind of compare them to this site, the feeling of me of this site is it's a ceremonial site, not a living site, you know. It's a special place where people came, probably on pilgrimages. They could have lived nearby. They could have lived a distance away. They came here. They may have come up here to celebrate solstices, equinoxes, and all of that. Maybe a wedding, maybe a death, you know, or something like that. So it has always been, you know, part of me and my family. I've never known anything different, to be honest with you. But as the older I get, the more I appreciate my dad saving this, as well as the other people that did research over almost a century now.
Knowing there is very little information that we can concretely say about some of these sites, their preservation is of the utmost importance. It is significant to note that some of these places have been vandalized times over, and unfortunately, the damage has rendered us blind to history.
Dennis, listen, thank you so much. I appreciate you taking the time to sit down with us and talk about this amazing location. Is there anything else you'd like to tell us before we conclude?
Yeah, we got some optically stimulated illumination datings coming up, and we believe they'll be out by this summer. And they did 12 other places in New England. And so when we talk about this site, we have to keep in mind that there are other sites around here, and they're just as important as this site. And they may help answer questions here, too, when we find out more about those sites. So the OSL dating should be coming out by summer. So in about a month or two, we might have the answers of, we have 12 carbon datings. We have the astronomical data. We'll see how this new dating technique fits in with those dates, too. So we're rather excited about that. And, so we'll, stay tuned. We should have some better answers coming up shortly.
Between OSL, LiDAR scanning, and radiocarbon dating, we will progressively pursue the truth buried within the Earth. While America's Stonehenge may lie on acres of bedrock, there is much to be explored in the way of origin. With life becoming less permanent, as we create for the moment and not for longevity, sites like America's Stonehenge whispers a simplicity and balanced way of existence, and murmurs of the harmony we once all knew. Thank you for joining us on this incredible expedition into the world of history and esoterics, forever reminded of a time long vanquished. This is America's Stonehenge.